Welcome to the Idea to Value podcast, where in every episode we highlight the latest insights into creativity and innovation from experts around the world. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn. I care about the evidence behind what makes ideas happen, and I've already helped thousands of people just like you through my unique insights into recent scientific findings of how creativity works. I also show you how to turbocharge innovation programs so they finally deliver on the value and ideas you've been struggling to execute. Get your free training on how creativity can be improved by registering now at www.ideatovalue.com. Now let's get on with today's episode. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Idea to Value podcast. I'm very happy to have Paul Jarvis with me today. Paul helps entrepreneurs around the world, and he's got a special focus on people in the creative industries or people who are trying to grow a creative business. Paul, it's wonderful having you with us today.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me today.
So, Paul, I've gotten to know you because you write a lot on the subject of creativity at work and people in the creative industries. Can you just give us a bit of background as to what your interest there is and how you got there?
Yeah, I mean, I started working for myself about 20 years ago, so I've been doing this for quite some time. When I started and I would tell people that I worked for myself, it didn't really make sense to a lot of people because there wasn't really the freelance economy that there is now, and it was still very corporate centric, which people were like, well, I don't understand what you do. What do you mean you work for yourself? Like, what's your job? But nowadays, it's kind of like when you ask people that or people tell you that, it's kind of understood like what that type of work is. So I started out doing design work for clients mostly. I owned a service-based company for many years. And since then, I've kind of branched out into a more product focus. So I do things like write books, make courses, write software, and host podcasts.
Okay. And going back to the time when you started out, what was the general reaction when you had when speaking with people about what it's like to run a one-person business?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, people didn't understand it, or they didn't think that it was a good idea. I mean, most of the decisions I made in my life, people have said, I don't think that's a good idea. And I've been like, okay, time will tell if you're right or I'm right. I mean, when I dropped out of university, the dean of the program thought that it was a bad idea and that I would be back. And that was a long time ago, and that neither of those two things happened. When I went vegan, people were like, that's a bad idea. And I'm like, time will tell, and I feel much better eating a plant-based diet. Same with working for myself. When I started to do it, people were like, well, that doesn't really make sense. Or they thought that, well, that's good for now, but when you see success, when you start to see some success, if you do see some success, then you can grow it into a real business or a legitimate business. Like, it's good to start small, but if things work out, you should probably grow it into something much bigger. And yeah, I obviously disagreed with that because it hasn't grown in 20 years, and it has been successful for me.
What do you mean by this, that something's grown, it's been successful, but it hasn't grown? Those two things seem to be sort of opposite each other.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of the story that we're told in business school or in the media, that the byproduct of business success is always growth. And I think that certainly it makes sense in some cases. I think where I disagree with most of the kind of literature on this is that it's not required. So for example, a company like Airbnb, if they had 2 properties on their site, wouldn't be useful in the market. They need to have thousands and tens of hundreds, probably hundreds of thousands now of properties in every location, and lots of people working there and lots of people using it. It's good for that type of company. For the type of business that I run, I don't need a lot to make it run. So I think that growth makes sense sometimes, and I think it's up to us to question what growth makes sense for us, for our profit and our profit margins, for our customers, and for the life that we want to lead, because sometimes growth doesn't make sense. It's funny, there was a study done, there's a Inc. magazine publishes this Inc. 5000 list of the best companies, the fastest growing companies. It's like the list that every startup wants to be on. And the Kauffman Foundation did a study on the Inc. 5000 list 5 to 8 years later and found that 2/3 of them had gone out of business. And this is only 5 to 8 years later. And these were the businesses at the time that were said to be the best businesses. And they didn't go out of business because of shifts in market or the CEO did something stupid. They mostly went out of business because they grew too fast. And they were spending beyond their means, and they were spending based on what they thought they were going to make in the future. And I think that in that case, I think we can all agree that growth doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Whereas in the Airbnb example, it kind of does make a lot of sense. And I think that if we assume things that should be questioned are concrete or fact, then we can get into trouble. And that's really what the book Company of One that I wrote is about. Is why don't we question things before acting on them? And I think that can lead to better decision making in business.
But the fundamental question is, if you're an entrepreneur or someone who wants to start up a business, or maybe even the business at the stage where you've got a couple of employees, surely you do need to focus on growth, because you need to pay for people's paychecks. You need to make sure you've got enough to save and retire on, and you need to make sure that you keep your customers happy.
100%. And I agree with that. And that's a very valid point. I think what we need to define here is what enough is for every business, because we all start at zero when we start a business. We all start requiring more. Like if I started a business tomorrow, I would need customers. I would need profit. I would need a lot of things. So I would need to grow, and I would need to adopt a growth-centric mindset to get to the point where I can make the business sustainable. Because if a business is profitable, it can be sustainable. So, and I'm not advocating that businesses should be small enough that they're not making money. That doesn't make sense. That seems more like a hobby than a business. But where I think we need to consider is what the enough point is for the businesses that we run, because we could get to a point where maybe we don't need more employees to make more money, or maybe we don't need to make more money because we have to spend more to get it. If we're going from organic acquisition to paid acquisition, it's going to cost a lot more to get a little bigger. And so if we're only looking at the gross number, we can be misled a lot of the times. So I think this focus, that's kind of the point of the book, is this focus on enough. Because for every business and for every business owner, enough is different. Your enough and my enough are different. A company that has 4 employees versus a one-person business, their enough is different. So I think it's up to each of us to determine, like, what is enough for my business? Like, what covers a good salary, some savings, some durability of having a bit of a liquid runway? What is enough for what my business needs? And then if we've reached enough, then how can we just optimize for that instead of just blindly chasing growth forever and ever and ever?
So I think the question in my mind is, this all sounds very, very logical, and obviously we all know about startups that fail because they used all of their founders' money, their venture capital, to focus on growth. But that's one reason to consider not trying to grow too fastly. But my question to you is, for the individual who doesn't have $1 million to go out and throw around, what's the why behind why thinking about growth doesn't need to be trying to end up like the next Airbnb? Is there any sort of more personal psychological reasons behind the advice that you're giving?
Yeah, it's ego. I think that, so when we start a business, we have the ego to believe that we can do something better than somebody else or another business, or we can do better than what the market currently offers customers. And so in that case, ego is a good thing. I think we all need a little bit of ego to get over things like self-doubt and fear. So in that case, I think it's really good. I think where ego can fail us as business owners is when we think we need more because it looks better, or because we're trying to keep up with another business that does the same, or we're trying to keep up with our neighbor, or we're at a dinner party. And if somebody asks me what I do for a living, if I say, well, I work for myself in my house wearing my pajamas every day, versus well, I own a business where I have 1,000 employees across 14 countries. I mean, the latter definitely seems like it sounds better, but is that do we live our lives to serve other people and what they think about us, or are we living our lives and running our business for what kind of lines up with what we want? And I think it all comes back to so when we're thinking about ego, it all comes back to success, because I think that what we're kind of told is that success looks like this specific thing. Like, this is what a successful person is. Like, Elon Musk is successful, or along those lines, where I think success is deeply personal. I think that my version of success, like, for example, like, I don't want to own a company like Facebook because I wouldn't want to have to sit in front of British or American Parliament or Congress or whatever and have to answer questions from people that think that I'm ruining that I'm ruining society. Or like in Elon Musk's example, he has a couch in his office because he works so much that he doesn't have time to go home. And so that to me isn't successful. But if I read like business publications or listen to different people online that say this is what success is, I'm going to end up chasing a version of success that doesn't even line up with what I want. So I think it's up to each of us to define what success is and then build our businesses to line up with that, to line up with kind of what we want out of our lives, what we want out of our businesses. And for me personally, that isn't growth. Like, I don't want to have to manage a team of people. I mean, I have a small team of people that I work with. They're all freelancers. I wouldn't want to have to deal with HR or managing full-time employees. But I think it's up to each of us. Like, some people are great managers. Some people were born to manage and lead others, which I think is great. That's a great trait. I do not possess that trait. So I know that for my own business, that's not where my business should go, because then I would be deeply unhappy with my business. And if it's my business, then it's kind of my fault for leading it in that direction.
So the word successes is what you're talking about there. Surely, to play devil's advocate, most people would say success equals the dollar signs, like the big bags of money you get at the end of it. But what, in your book, what do you mean by success? How do you help people think about that differently?
Yeah, and I mean, there's a study done by, I think it was Pew, that found that, and it was written about in The Atlantic, and they found that people are happier when they make more money, which makes sense, but only up to a certain point. And I think it was something like $78,000 or $74,000 American. Around that,
yeah.
Yeah. But then they found that if people made more than that, they weren't more happy. And in most cases, they were actually less happy. So it was like a bell curve of happiness versus like correlated to wealth. And so I think for me, success, it's actually very simple to me. It's how I get to spend my day. So success to me is spending my day in a way that I feel fulfilled. So some of that involves work because I need to make money, because I need my business to be profitable because it's a business. And I actually like working. Like, I can't imagine, like, I save for retirement, but I can't, in my mind, I can't grasp what retirement might look like because I really, really like work. But it also involves not being working. It also involves, like, happiness, and success to me involves having time to spend with my family, going to the gym, making meals from scratch. And all of those things are as important as the business. And yeah, I like to make money. I exist in a capitalist economy. I still see the value of money for sure. I'm not some like hippie in Birkenstocks wearing a poncho in the woods, which is what some people think I am, which is just ridiculously funny. But I do think that there's a limit to that. Like, I'm only willing to work up to a certain point. I'm not willing to, like, I wouldn't be willing to work double the hours to make double the money, because then all of the other things in my life would suffer, and then I wouldn't be happy, and I don't feel like I would be successful.
Absolutely. I think boiling it down to happiness and what makes you as an individual and everyone as an individual happy, it's really very good advice. Now, when we're talking about individuals making money using their own business, quite often it gets called a lifestyle business. Over the last year or a couple of years, there's been an explosion of experts online who can guarantee you, if you follow their simple 12-step formula, you too can live on your own private island, working on your laptop 1 day a week. From your experience and doing research into what it takes to build the company of one, what do you think the likelihood of that being successful is? Can you really become successful doing no work?
Yeah, I can't see how, unless you're independently wealthy to begin with, then maybe, or you're famous to begin with. I think that those things would definitely stack the deck, but I also think that it's not like working isn't a bad. So I see a lot of issues with that. I think sand and laptops, first of all, do not mix. You can't get sand out of laptops. I don't understand this. But I also think that, yeah, I agree that kind of the term lifestyle business connotes this like silly idea that work isn't work, or that you work for. Like Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Work Week, was never meant to be taken literally. He doesn't work 4 hours a week. He works a lot more than that. Just like Company of One isn't meant to be taken as like you have to be a one-person business. There's so many examples of companies that are 50, 100, 1,000 people, where it's more a mindset of questioning things. And I think that we all have lifestyle businesses. Maybe not by that definition of like sipping Mai Tais on an island with a laptop 1 hour a day, but we all have, like, every business that we have, or every business that exists, has a certain prescribed lifestyle. Like if you work for a large corporation, you probably have to work set hours, 9 to 5, 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, and your downtime is evenings and weekends. That's a very specific set prescribed lifestyle that you have with that type of business. Most people wouldn't agree that a corporate job isn't a lifestyle business, but it does give you a very specific lifestyle. Same with if you have a venture-backed, growth-focused Silicon Valley startup. You're going to be beholden not just to customers and acquiring them at a rapid rate, but to investors and them making a lot of money back. And they're going to want to see you working more than 9 to 5 every single day. They're going to want to see you putting in 20-hour all-nighters. They're going to want to buy you a couch so you can sleep in your office. So I think when you work for yourself, you get to decide to some degree. Like obviously you have to make money. Obviously you have to provide some kind of value to clients, but I also think it's up to you when you work for yourself to determine, like, what type of business do I want? Like, is it important for me to work set hours? Do I want to work 80 hours a week? I don't think the answer should ever be yes to that question. So I think every business is a lifestyle business, but I think the type of businesses that are being pitched as lifestyle businesses, where you work the least amount of hours and sip Mai Tais on a beach, I think the only time people say that is when they have a course to sell you or a book to sell you on achieving that lifestyle. I think that there's actually been, a little bit off topic, but it's something that's super interesting to me, is that there's now industries that only exist as profitable industries because they're in so much as they teach other people how to have jobs in those. Dropshipping is a great example of that, where there aren't very many or almost no dropshippers that make money, except for the drop shippers that teach other people how to be drop shippers. Yeah. So I think we have to be wary of any industry where the only potential for revenue is teaching other people how to exist in that industry. Like it's ludicrous that these things exist.
Absolutely. Now, finally, the last thing I wanted to ask you is, the reason we got in contact is I've been reading your work and I've been very aware of you for quite a while because you write so much about creativity in the workplace. What do you think makes a difference for people achieving their best creative output?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that a lot of times we confuse productivity and time spent. Like, I think that if we try to be creative all day, every day, we're going to burn out and it's going to be hard. I think that I'm the most creative when I have, 1, a good night's sleep, 2, I've filled my stomach with healthy food, and 3, when I've taken care of my body and got a bit of exercise. And I feel like if my job is creativity, then it's up to me to be creative on demand. And that's hard to do, but I can stack the deck by taking care of myself, because I know that when I need my brain to kick in and be creative, it's going to be more willing to do that if I've kind of taken care of it. If I was working 16 hours a day, it would be very difficult to just to pump out anything of quality. I think the other thing that's required for creativity is space. And I think that we get confused about being productive, like I said, with creativity, because I feel like when we're working, like I don't feel like I can produce my best work when if I write, like my newsletter is called the Sunday Dispatches. If I wrote that Saturday night, I would be too stressed to create something good enough to share on Saturday night. So if I work ahead of my schedule, if I write these articles like 4-6 weeks in advance, that to me, and it could be different for everybody, but that to me, if I can alleviate the stress from the work, then I feel like I can do better work, because the only thing I'm thinking about is the work. I can be present instead of thinking about the future and the outcomes. Even with things like writing a book, like if I'm thinking about the future, it's really hard to be present at the same time. It's hard to write a chapter while hoping that the book gets on like the New York Times bestseller list. It's easier to just write the book and focus on the book. And I mean, so the third thing that I would do, so taking care of myself, giving myself space to create. The third thing that I would think about is how I can remove as many distractions as possible. It's so weird that we've kind of accepted in society that we can be distracted by electronic devices all the time. So if I'm writing, I haven't had notifications on any of my computers or phones for about 5 or 6 years. My business is still profitable. I haven't died. I haven't missed something really important. And I think that the more we distract ourselves, the harder it is to get into a creative mind state and then stay in that mindset. So if I'm writing, the only thing open on my computer is writing. But then if I'm on email, the only thing open is email. Like I'm very big on single tasking because I feel like I can get into it, I can do the thing and then move on. If I'm on Twitter, the only thing open on my computer is Twitter. It doesn't matter what the task is. If I just focus on the specific thing I'm doing, I can get into it faster and I can get into a flow of creating something much faster as well.
Perfect. Paul, it's been absolutely wonderful having you here. The book you've got coming out, can you just tell us a little bit about that, what it is, what sort of topics people can learn about in it, and where they can get it?
Sure. So the book is called Company of One, Why Staying Small is the Next Big Thing for Business. And a lot of what's in the book is what we talked about here. It's questioning whether or not growth makes sense, because sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. So I think this idea that bigger isn't better, better is better, is definitely something that flows through the book. I talk a lot in the book about purpose being a pragmatic lens through which all business decisions should be filtered through. And I also talk a lot about what I was talking about on the last point, is that busyness is really hard to be creative when you're busy all the time. And if our default state wasn't busy, because nobody gives out badges of honor for being busy, I think we can do our best work. So those are at least some of the things touched on in the book. And it comes out January 15 in North America, 17 in the UK and Australia, and most of the rest of the world.
Perfect. Paul, it's been wonderful having you here. I subscribe to your newsletter. I recommend other people do as well. Where can they go to find out more about you?
Yeah, so ofone.co is the book website, and the website with my newsletter is pjrvs.com, or just search for Paul Jarvis on Google because nobody remembers my URL.
I'll make sure that the links are down in the description below. Paul, it's been wonderful having you here today.
Thanks, Nick. This was a blast.
Thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave me a comment about what you thought and what you'd like to see more about. If you want to take your creativity and innovation capabilities to the next level, then invest in yourself with the premium training only available at ideatovalue.com. These exclusive training modules have all been put together by me, Nick Skillicorn, and have been used by thousands of artists, innovation leaders, and CEOs to become better at understanding the source of their creativity and executing on their innovation ambitions. And there is no risk to you, as they are backed by our money-back guarantee. Now, don't forget to go out there and make your ideas a reality. See you again soon.